Hi, I'm Glenn from Android Audio. I like putting stuff together, especially music and software. Today, I want to share some cool tricks I've been learning about audio formats. For most of our careers, we've been told to use integer or fixed point arithmetic for audio. There's some good reasons why we all use integers. They're great. Fixed point too. From digital to analog converters to CDs to USB audio, integers and fixed point are everywhere. As we all know, hackers avoid floats as much as we do basic. So let's review the reasons why we don't use floating point. First of all, it's not there. No affordable floating point unit. This was my first FPU. 5,000 flops and so expensive we only used it when we absolutely had to. Floats are way big, 4 bytes each. Okay, this is just gross, but you get the idea. Floats are huge. This one is my favorite. The decadence of Rome, floats. Even if you have the CPU and memory for floating point, it's just sinful to waste resources so extravagantly on something that's clearly a luxury. It's kind of like using a 64-bit int to represent a Boolean. You do realize this is what actually happens now? So, floats are clearly out, or so we think. Now, what do we really want from our numbers in audio? Wide dynamic range for soft and loud, consistent accuracy across that range, and lots of headroom. No clipping. Let's examine our friends, integer and fixed point. First, integer. This is simple. Adjacent values differ by 1. Integers are represented in 2's complement binary. Fixed point is the same with an implied binary point. For audio, the implied binary point is almost always at the left of the most significant bit, and adjacent values differ by a constant power of 2. It's still 2's complement binary. Now earlier, we thought floats were out. But are they really? Let's look at them anyway. Don't worry, it's just to make fun of them. Or maybe not. Floating point starts with a fixed point mantissa. The number of bits in the mantissa determines the overall accuracy. Then we add an integer exponent. This increases the range. The wider the exponent, the more range. There's a sign bit too, but we'll ignore that for now. Now, remember what we all want in audio. Wide dynamic range for soft and loud, consistent accuracy across that range, and lots of headroom to prevent clipping. Let's see how well float does on all three. We'll start with dynamic range. Here's the formula for a float combining sign, mantissa, and exponent. Turns out the exponent increases the dynamic range dramatically compared to integer or fixed point. How many dB or bits you need for content delivery is controversial. I'm not going there. What is certain is that a wide dynamic range is useful internally, and float provides that. Now, let's look at accuracy. Remember, adjacent integer values differ by 1, and adjacent fixed point values by a constant power of 2. Sounds good at first. With ints and fixed point, though the differences are constant, the ratios between adjacent values are not constant for either integer or fixed point. Whoa! What's that going to do to consistent accuracy? We lose accuracy where we need it most, quiet signals. In this graph, the ratios approach 2 as we get quieter instead of 1. And here's our ratio chart for float. The ratios between adjacent values are now approximately constant and approach 1. The distances are logarithmic. Notice the tighter packing near 0? This means consistent accuracy across the full dynamic range. So, soft and loud both sound great. Finally, let's look at headroom. Headroom is a safety zone above your nominal maximum level to help prevent clipping during intermediate calculations and transients. This is where floating point really shines. It's almost impossible to clip samples during intermediate calculations because the range of a float is astronomical. Maximize your headroom. So, it's time to think differently. Those were some compelling reasons to consider floating point in your next audio app. You don't need to be an expert in numerical analysis to use floating point, but floating point is not a panacea. You do need to know the gotchas, and there are a few. Check out the references at the end with some tips and tricks that will help you avoid the most common problems. So, I ask you to consider floating point in your next audio app. And what about all those reasons not to use floating point? Now, you're probably expecting me to say those reasons aren't valid anymore. Some of them are still true, especially the moral depravity one. But the benefits mean it's time to hold our noses and consider floating point anyway. Be forewarned, if you use floating point, others will try to shame you during code reviews. So be prepared for glory. Be proud. Wear the scarlet F. You'll do fine. Make sure to check out this link for more information. I'm Glenn Caston. Thank you for watching.